Hey guys, my name is Aiden, and I recently completed my first year of climbing. I've recorded every single climbing session, so today I'm going to share the 10 most important things that I've learned so far. So stay tuned. The first thing I want to talk about is falling correctly. Knowing how to fall will help prevent injuries and allow you to push yourself on harder moves. When you fall, you should land on your feet, bend your knees, and fall onto your back or side while tucking in your arms and head. Don't try to stick the landing, or else you can hurt your ankles. Don't stick out your arm to break the fall either. For slabs, which are the walls that slant inwards, you can put yourself away from the wall when you know you're going to fall. This helps you avoid scraping yourself on the wall and other holds on the way down. So, when you know you're going to fall, just push away. You should try falling on the ground until you're comfortable with it. So, you don't even have to go anywhere. Just kind of pretend you're here, fall back. Then you can try falling on the wall and gradually get higher and higher until you're comfortable with falling from the top. The next tip I want to talk about is the best way to actually grab a hold. Generally, the most effective way will be 90 degrees to the edge. If you try to pull straight down on something that's angled sideways, you're gonna have a higher chance of slipping off. So if the hold is horizontal like this, the best way to hold it will be pulling straight down. If it's more angled, like this one, you're probably gonna wanna hit it from this angle. Okay, so this hold is interesting because its edge is big and it has kind of multiple lines of pull you can use. So you have a complete side pull, an undercling, and then kind of a combination of the two right there. When you grab it as an undercling, you're gonna be right up against it at 90 degrees, and then you actually wanna be above it, like that. There are also a bunch of different hold types, from jugs, crimps, slopers, and pinches. For jugs, you can kind of hold onto them however you want. You can get pretty deep onto your hand usually, all of your fingers are in there. And sometimes you can even press into it with your thumb like that. For pinches like this, you're gonna have to engage your fingers on one side and then your thumb on the other. Sometimes you can turn into a side pull, but sometimes you just have to pinch it straight on like that. For these slopers, you kind of just put yourself on the best edge of the sloper, like that. You might want to open your hands a bit, maximize the surface area. And then for crimps, you're really only going to be able to fit your fingertips in there. Sometimes you can engage in a full crimp, sometimes kind of this half crimp with your thumb pressing on the bottom. So generally, you'll want to be directly underneath the hold with your body as close to the wall as possible. So if your elbows are sticking out like this, you're probably pulling out from the wall, and that can make slopey holds feel especially bad. Instead, try to tuck those elbows underneath and keep your weight below the hold, and it'll feel a lot better. A related tip I want to talk about is keeping your arms straight. A lot of beginners tend to keep their arms bent when they grab onto holds. However, this puts more load on your muscle. Try staying on the wall with your arms bent. Then try staying on the wall with your arms straight. You should find that it's easier to stay on the wall with your arms straight. The next tip I want to talk about is foot placement. Generally, the most effective way is to use the front of your foot, particularly the big toe. A lot of beginners like to use the middle of their feet. Eventually, you're going to run into holds that are too small for the middle of your foot. Additionally, it's hard to generate power from the middle of your foot. With the front part of your foot, you can flex your ankle and even add a few inches to your reach. When you're on your toes, you can also pivot your feet. It's going to be important when I talk about turning your hips in later, so stay tuned. When you place your foot, you want to look at it and put weight through it before looking away. A lot of beginners will just glance at a hold and then look away before even getting their feet up. This leads to them blindly tapping their feet until they feel comfortable in the hold. Beginners also tend to place their feet without actually putting weight through them. This makes the feet more likely to slip. When you place a foot, you really want to feel the tension throughout your entire leg. Another thing you should avoid is placing your foot against the wall and then dragging it down onto the hold. This will save your shoes and help you practice precise footwork. This is important when foot holds get small or they only have a small, tiny usable part. Another footwork related tip I want to talk about is swapping feet. This is fundamental and you'll probably use it on a lot of climbs. If the hold is big enough, you can just kind of roll one on while peeling the other one off. If it's small, you're going to put one foot right on top of the other one and pull the bottom one out. To improve your footwork, I recommend the sticky feet drill and the silent feet drill. For the silent feet drill, you're not allowed to make any noise with your feet. For the sticky feet drill, you aren't allowed to readjust your feet at all. These drills emphasize precision and will help eliminate excess foot movements. You can also practice your footwork on slab. Try to minimize the usage of your hands. You can try using only your palms, your thumbs, or even no hands at all. So here's an example of just me trying to use only my thumbs. And here would be me using only my palms. And here would be no hands at all. The next tip I want to talk about is route reading. You should know where the climb starts, where it ends, and have an idea of the moves in between. If you don't have a plan, you're going to waste energy trying to figure out what holds are available and how you can use them effectively. So the first step is to identify which holds you have available to you. Keep in mind you might be able to use features, like volumes or these corners. In climbing, we call these corners arêtes. The next step is to identify which holds are for your hands and which ones are for your feet. Sometimes you can tell by the relative size and shapes of a hold. If you're on a V0 and the start hold is a jug, it's unlikely that you're going to have to grab these tiny footholds. You can also look for chalk or rubber marks. If it's covered in chalk, it's probably a handhold, and if it's covered in black rubber, then it's probably a foothold. Keep in mind, holds can be used for both hands and feet, so one might have both. From there, you can try to think about where you want to place your hands and feet and make each move. For a beginner, that's pretty complicated, so I recommend just trying to figure out where to put your hands. A quick tip is to look at the edges of the holds. If the edge is on the left, it could be a sign that's for your left hand. If the edge is on the right, that could be a sign for your right hand. Once you've identified a hold that you want to use for a certain hand, you can work back from the beginning to see how you end up in this position. So let's take a look. Our hands start here. This looks like it might be for our right hand. So we do this, and then we can bump again to get it here. And then we can move our right hand over. So let's try that and see if that works. So we go with our left hand, go with our left hand again, and then go with our right hand. And that's one example of how you can read a route. You may find that there are multiple options to reach a certain position. You want to consider all of your options, but start with the one that has the highest chance of working. If you fall off, ask yourself why. Think about how you can make that move feel better, or consider other options. There are many levels to route reading, but eventually you want to get to the point where you can visualize an entire climb from the beginning until the end. My next tip is to use opposite hand and foot. This might be the most important tip for finding balance on the wall. It's actually the foundation for all of my climbing. I got this tip from a channel called Movement for Climbers, and he calls it the first rule of climbing. The most stable position is one where you have opposite hand and opposite foot. It's so stable that you can actually remove one hand and one foot to make the next move. If you try to use the same side hand and foot, you're going to swing away from the wall with what we call a barn door. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the foundation for all of my climbing. Whenever I'm on the wall, I try to see if I can use opposite hand and opposite foot. If you're having trouble with a move, try to find a foothold on the same side as the hand that you're going up with. So for example, if I want to get my right hand here, and it's currently here, I should try to look for a right foothold. Then I can make that move. This concept can also be used to help you read a route. If they give you a right foothold, that might be a clue that you should go to the next hold with your right hand. Let's look at this yellow climb. They give you a right foothold, so that might be an indication that you should go to the last hold with your right hand. As I mentioned earlier, opposite hand and opposite foot frees up one of your legs. This leads me to my next tip, which is flagging. Flagging is a technique that uses your free foot as a counterbalance to let you reach further. Let's look at this example on the ground. This is how far I can reach with both feet on the ground. If I want to reach further, I can lift my left leg up and extend it as a counterbalance. Then I can reach this hold on the right. The same thing applies when you're on the wall. So this is the most basic form of a flag, the outside flag. I'm flagging with my left foot here. And you can use this with opposite hand, opposite foot to reach the next hold. There's also a flag you can use for the same side hand and foot. So let's say I'm on my right hand and foot here. I put my left foot behind me and I can make the next move. This is called a back flag. There's also an inside flag. This is when you want to move your hand but avoid a foot swap. I could accomplish the same thing by doing a foot swap and doing an outside flag. But to save me a move, I could just inside flag and reach for the next hold. Flagging is a fundamental technique. Whenever I'm reading a route, I look for positions where I can use opposite hand and foot and flag with my free leg. The next tip I want to talk about is turning your hips in. This technique can be used to gain additional reach. This is how far I can reach with hips square. This is how far I can reach with my hips turned in and standing on my legs. Along with extra reach, getting your hips closer to the wall shifts weight from your hands onto your feet. This is a more efficient position that takes load off of your biceps. This tip can be applied with the previous two tips. Let's say you have opposite hand and foot and want to reach the next hold with your right hand. You can turn your right hip in, flag your left foot, and then reach up with your right hand. Turning your hips in is a fundamental technique of climbing, and I recommend using it as often as you can. It might not be necessary on every move, but it may be more efficient. I suggest trying to play around with it and see if moves feel more efficient with your hips square or hips turned in. I found that I personally prefer to turn my hips in when the next hold is within static reach. For bigger moves, I prefer my hips square. My next tip I want to talk about is heel hooks. This is where you place your heel on the hold and pull on it like you have another arm. There are many situations in which heel hooks are useful, but I've tried to narrow it down to the two most common scenarios that I've seen so far. So the first scenario is when you need to maintain balance while moving your hands. So let's take a look at this yellow climb, for example. Let's say I'm in this position and I want to move my right hand over. It can be kind of hard to keep balance. And that's because I'm gonna have the same side hand and foot, well, if I take my right arm off. And that's gonna cause me to barn door that way. So to counteract this, you can throw in a heel hook. What you do is place your heel on the hold, and that lets you move your right hand over. The second scenario I want to talk about is shifting your weight over your hips. This is called rocking over, and it's very useful for taking weight off your arms and moving in a target direction. It's also a really common way for topping out boulders. Let's take some of these holds here, for example. If I have this hold, and I want to get to that gray hold, starting from this position, what I can do is place a heel, rock over it, and shift my weight to the right. When you place your heel hook, your toes might be upward with the sole facing the wall. After you place your toe hook, you really want to try to get your foot parallel to the wall and point those toes down. This will maximize the contact area between the hold and your shoe. It'll also keep your hips closer to the wall and apply more force to the heel hook. The next tip I want to talk about is climbing dynamically. A lot of beginners will tend to bend their arms and reach for holds statically, but this can be inefficient and really hard on your biceps. And eventually, you're going to have to reach holds that are outside of your static range. Proper dynamic movement can also be more efficient because you're generating more power through your legs. The foundation of dynamic movement is the dead point technique. To perform it, you want to straighten your arms and sink your hips away from the target hold. Then, you want to pull into the wall with your hands while thrusting your hips inwards and straightening your legs. At your peak, there will be a point where you're neither moving up or down, nor inwards or outwards from the wall. This moment of weightlessness is called the dead point, and it's easiest to latch onto a hold at the dead point. You can practice the dead point by using jugs to pull yourself into the wall and trying to hold that position with no hands for as long as possible. You can also try to do climbs by moving both hands at the same time. This will force you to use the dead point technique because you don't have one hand holding you onto the wall the entire time. Now that you know about some of the essential climbing techniques, I want to talk about confidence. Early on, I realized that a lot of the moves were within my physical limits, but I just wasn't confident enough to do them. Once I committed, I was surprised at how easy they were. The first step to gaining confidence is getting comfortable with falling. This will allow you to try scary moves in the first place because you know nothing bad is going to happen if you fail. From there, the next step is to just practice the positions or moves that feel scary. Once you've practiced the movements and positions, then you can fully commit to doing the move. An effective way to practice is to make the move easier. One way you can make a move easier is by adding holds. Let's say you want to work on this grade climb and you want to move from this hold to this hold, but the move is really big. What you can do instead is try moving from this hold to this hold. So what that's going to look like is instead of trying to do this, what you can do is this, and kind of get used to that feeling. You can also try breaking a move down into parts. So for example, first you might want to focus on shifting your hips into the proper position to do the move. Then you can try touching the next hold, and then finally you can try putting the move all together. When you finally do a scary move and send a boulder, don't just check it off your list and never come back to it. Practice that move until you're so confident that it feels impossible to fall on it. This experience will be incredibly valuable when you encounter similar moves in the future. When it comes to dynamic moves, I often practice by jumping into the position from the ground. This helps me get comfortable with the movement and the position that I want to end up in. Once I'm comfortable with that, I'll try the entire move. So, those are the top 10 tips from my first year of climbing. What are your most important tips? Leave a comment down below. If you want me to cover any of these tips in greater depth, please let me know and I'll try to make a video on it. I'd love to do more educational content in the future. But for now, please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!